Hi everyone, from around the country, and welcome to today's presentation. I'd first like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands we meet today. I pay our respects to ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So my name is Hayley Christian. I'm a Life Course Centre Chief Investigator and I lead the Knowledge Transfer Portfolio. Along with our Deputy Natasha Pearce and our wonderful committee members, some of whom you will meet today. So today's seminar is a little different to the usual. We will be launching the Knowledge Transfer Portfolio and sharing with you some of our hopes and dreams over the next few months. We'd like to also hear from you about your knowledge transfer experience, your training and resources that you would like as centre members as well. So today's format's quite informal. We're going to show you a video of what knowledge transfer is, what it means to centre members and our partners and stakeholders, and some examples and benefits of knowledge transfer as well. This will then be followed by a Q&A session facilitated by some of our knowledge transfer portfolio committee members. Importantly, as part of this session is we'd really love you to complete a very short, less than 5-minute online survey that'll help us as a committee to understand what kind of knowledge transfer activities, training and resources you would like. More about this little survey at the end of the seminar today. And just before we show you our knowledge transfer video, I'd really like to acknowledge and thank the Telethon Kids Institute communications team who have put the video together. And also importantly, all our centre members and partners and stakeholders who have contributed. So when you watch it, you will see some familiar faces. So let's take a look and share the video with you now.
Hi everybody. I'm really pleased to be involved in this exciting new initiative around knowledge transfer. I think it's a really important part of the new Life Course Centre that we've developed this new portfolio to really embed knowledge transfer into all of our research and our activities. And I believe that under the leadership of Hayley and her committee, we'll really get a really strong head start to ensure that knowledge transfer is an integral part of all of our research and activities.
Hi, my name's Hayley Christian and I lead the Life Course Centre's Knowledge Transfer Portfolio. The portfolio will enable Life Course Centre members to have impact with their research by supporting them with resources and training so they can disseminate and translate their research for policy and practice to the broader community with stakeholders from government, non-government, not-for-profit, business, and importantly, with those experiencing deep and persistent disadvantage. We'd like to share with you what knowledge transfer is, what it means to centre members and stakeholders, some of the benefits and some examples. But let's begin with what knowledge transfer is. It actually means many things to different people and in different contexts. And to support our centre members to engage in knowledge transfer effectively, we have adopted the ARC's definition. And that definition says that knowledge transfer is deliberately embedding knowledge for use in context outside of the researcher's sphere. It is transferred and translated in both ways between researchers and end user stakeholders. So let's hear from others what they think knowledge transfer is about.
Some people think that knowledge transfer is just what you do to embed your evidence or research into policy and practice. But it's much more than that. It's about building relationships with stakeholders, with consumers and others, to identify your research question, to help build instruments, to build interventions, of course, to disseminate those findings and translate it. So you're actively involving all of your consumers en route to influence policy and practice.
It is the integration of our research findings into practice and policy and public knowledge and opinion.
Knowledge transfer is the whole point. If we don't transfer the knowledge that we've generated, it's of limited value.
I'm particularly fond of the idea of exchange. So we're exchanging our knowledge, and that can go both ways between all parties who are impacted, who are interested, and who have a stake in the research that's being conducted. I also like to think of our exchange as being between other disciplines who are other academics as well, and that's particularly relevant in a centre of excellence where we may find that we're a catalyst, our knowledge is a catalyst for work that goes on to be used by other researchers to then have an impact down the track.
Knowledge transfer is ultimately a form of communication, and therefore it is a two-way process. Information can be shared, but it does not mean it is accepted. To be effective, knowledge transfer needs to resonate with all parties involved.
Supporting people to make decisions that are relevant to their own personal circumstances.
Knowledge transfer to me means working with stakeholders and the community throughout the research process to guide what we do and how we do it.
Good knowledge transfer is about partnerships and it's about planning. We should think about knowledge transfer as an activity that starts right at the conception of our research, all the way throughout the research process to the conclusion and sometimes beyond. The stronger partnerships we build with end users and the better we understand that knowledge transfer is a two-way street, the more likely we're going to have effective practices and get greater impact from our research.
Well, I feel knowledge transfer is first and foremost about relationships. So when we as researchers really get to know and connect with those who will use our knowledge to make better decisions, and we involve them in the research process to find the answers to solve real-world problems that they face, we make a greater difference for kids and families.
The benefits of doing knowledge transfer well is that we have a responsibility, ultimately, to spend these public funds well and efficiently and to ensure that the best result possible is achieved. And then secondly, I feel that if we do knowledge transfer along the entire lifetime of a research project, that the end result is going to be more meaningful and it's going to end in policy or service, whatever the end result is going to be more usable and ultimately a better product.
I think knowledge transfer helps us to do better research by building our understanding, and it's essential so that the public can benefit from the work that we do.
There will never be a final say on knowledge because cities and societies are never finished. They are always changing in complex and non-linear ways. So considering this, the importance of knowledge transfer is about searching for improvements in our cities and societies. More often than not, I find this requires the dismantling of existing knowledge and ideology that is no longer fit for purpose.
Another of the benefits is really also the understanding, like I said, about the uncertainties that we have. The idea that there maybe isn't just one best policy, there may be a number of different solutions and alternatives to the questions that we face, and weighing up the pros and cons of those.
One of the best examples of knowledge transfer that we've had the opportunity to look at is with our Friendly Schools program. So it's a research pipeline that's been run for nearly 20 years. And in that process, we've engaged young people's voices, we've engaged stakeholders, policymakers, practitioners to help us to identify our research questions, to develop our interventions, develop our instruments, help recruit participants, obviously help us collect data and interpret those data and translate them into practice. It's enabled commercialisation so that we have those partners from the outset. I don't mean commercialisation in terms of earning additional dollars, but commercialisation in finding a way to fund its ongoing translation. So it's not enough just to hand over an innovation. You need to be able to provide the supports to enable that to happen very actively. The Solid Kids, Solid Schools research that we did working with Aboriginal communities is probably one of the best examples of cultural translation, where Aboriginal elders and community members and particularly young Aboriginal people provided much advice in the development of a resource that enabled schools and students to learn more about the ways that Aboriginal children are bullied and the kinds of supports that they needed. The advantage of this translation process meant that it was embedded in cultural practices and in protocols and in language that enabled the community to make best use of those resources rather than trying to translate them after we'd finished the research.
Well, there's many different projects, but a couple that spring to mind might be, for example, the Every Family initiative led by Matt Sanders, where we are evaluating the outcomes of the rollout of Triple P across Queensland and looking at the outcomes for children compared to children in states that haven't had access to Triple P. So this is a population level approach to parenting intervention, which I think is something quite new in Australia and possibly even around the world. Smallest scale example that I was involved in was working with one of our postdoctoral researchers around women and poverty and violence.
At Anti-Poverty Week, we try ourselves to do this, to take academic work because we want to be evidence-based and we want to cite academic research, but we do try and turn it into more useful, clear messages. And we do that through a series of fast facts we've produced. And we've drawn from the Life Course Centre, particularly for one that we produced last year on women, violence and poverty, where it was really important to have more evidence to show that actually women who are the victims of violence are more likely to have financial hardship following. And we were also able to show that there were other aspects as well, including a higher prevalence before.
At Anglicare WA, we're committed to a just and fair Western Australia where everyone can thrive. We know that to tackle disadvantage and make transformational change, we need to influence the policies and systems around us. We're an active partner in the Life Course Centre because we believe research should inform strong public policy to improve our communities and address the underlying structural forces of disadvantage. We also rely on research to continually improve our services, creating new and innovative ways that we can serve the community.
Increasingly, I see the value in a more, particularly in applied social research, the need for co-design and co-production with communities, with policy stakeholders, with people with lived experience of poverty and disadvantage, with service providers, etc. And I think the kind of knowledge and evidence making can really benefit from bringing together coalitions of those stakeholders and leveraging their distinct expertise. In terms of the Life Course Centre and the research community around it, I think that often researchers think in terms of providing their results from research projects or analysis or their modelling or whatever. And I think an untapped resource is people's really long-standing expertise in a field that can understand the contours of that field of knowledge, and or whether it's disciplinary or otherwise. And they can bring to bear that deep expertise that people in organisations such as the Brotherhood don't necessarily have access to.
From an organisational point of view, it injects new people, ideas and information into an organisation that is often very myopic or focused on itself. It can get caught into ruts, so it does the same things all the time. We're an old organisation, close to 200 years, and we've got particular ways of doing things. And as the world changes, it's not always we need to adapt to, or at least challenge the way we do things. So bringing in external parties in with different ideas actually helps grow and keep the organisation relevant to today's communities and the people we assist.
There's much research that we could do that we're interested in, but the research is really quite useless unless we can use it in ways that actually transform the world. So knowledge transfer is a really critical part of the Life Course Centre, and I'm really excited to have the new portfolio under the leadership of Hayley and her colleagues, and I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes of what the portfolio can help us achieve.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Natasha and I'm a member of the Knowledge Transfer Portfolio Committee. I'm located in WA at the Telethon Kids Institute. I really hope you enjoyed the video and it really sparked some thoughts perhaps for you about what knowledge transfer can mean from both a researcher or a partner and consumer's perspectives as well. So the committee has representatives across all the centre nodes, and I have 3 other committee members here with me today. We have, and I'd like to introduce them now, if they wouldn't mind turning their cameras on. We have Sally from the University of Queensland, Sangeetha from the University of Melbourne, and Alyssa from the University of Sydney. So in this next part of the session, we would really love to hear from you. So we would like to invite you to ask any questions that you might have about the role of the portfolio or the work of the committee, or even just some of your first reactions to the video and comments that you would like to make. So if you would like to, you can turn on your camera and ask your questions directly, or put up your hand with the hands up function if you have a question, if there's discussion already in play. Or use the chat function, as Hayley mentioned, to write your questions or comments there. So I've got Narelle also supporting here and monitoring the chat and the hands up for us as well. Thanks, Narelle. So I can see that there are a few comments starting to roll in already. That was a very nice video. Thank you, Lucy. Congratulations to the TKR Comms team. They did do a great job. Thank you. So while we're just waiting for some questions, I think, to pop up, I think I'd like to start by asking one, and perhaps if I can direct it to you, Sally, but what do you, how will the portfolio really work with the centre members to understand what knowledge transfer is and understand, the types of strategies that we can use most effectively?
Thanks, Natasha. I guess one of the big conversations we've had all the way along as part of this committee, as we've worked over the last year or so, on building up a strategy for KT as part of the centre, is really thinking about the fact that knowledge transfer isn't something we just do at the end. And I think that really resonated beautifully from that video, that it is actually something that happens right at the beginning, perhaps even earlier than that, if we're bringing in expertise of people who have, lived experience of these things, or have worked very heavily in the sectors that we're trying to influence. But at every different stage, there are all sorts of places that we can inform knowledge transfer. So one of the really big priorities for us is ensuring that as part of the committee, what we're working on is ensuring that we have training and guidance for all of those different stages. In terms of where we prioritise, because of course there's a lot of work and a lot of different parts that we could be doing. The survey that Hayley mentioned today is going to be really important to that. So we've got some ideas of what things we would like to do, and I'm sure Hayley can talk to that as well. But for us, it's about making sure that at each stage over the next few years, we're really gearing it to what are the needs of those across the centre, realising that people are at different stages, they're working with different kinds of level of stakeholder, whether that be, up in policy or individual families, or smaller scale projects or bigger scale projects. And so we really want to make sure we gauge that. So the best thing you can do is provide that feedback for the team or the committee, and so that we can actually make sure that those resources really align with the needs across the centre.
Thanks, Sally. And it's really great to kind of hear that the portfolio would really looking at practical resources and guides that can really support the centre members through the strategy. So that's great. I have a question that's popped up in the chat from Matt. I'm not sure, you've got your hand up as well. I'm not sure if you want to speak to your question perhaps, rather than me read it out.
Yeah, thank you. And well done with the video. I think it really captured the full breadth of the kind of challenges that we all confront in dealing with this really critical issue. And one of the things that I've been very conscious of over the years in being deeply involved in this knowledge transfer process is how expensive it can be at different stages of the R&D process, and that the whole idea of how to optimize our knowledge transfer capabilities for the different CIs and different projects that are being run. Part of it is to work out, well, what can a centre like the Life Course Centre do to presumably on a relatively limited budget, be able to support the full breadth of knowledge transfer challenges that are out there. And I'm wondering whether some of the greatest investments have to do with capability development around how to make some of the crucial calls about what level and type of knowledge transfer and engagement activities are most appropriately undertaken at which stage of the R&D process, assuming that you're involved in the development of solutions. And it's not always easy and not always straightforward, particularly when there's competing pressures for getting the word out that stems from our own universities to perhaps share knowledge in a way that is either premature, attracts attention to an institution, creates false hope with very little capacity for policy impact and follow through. And so I'm just sort of throwing out a whole bunch of issues there, Hayley, as you're sort of just thinking about this, just in terms of development of our capabilities to do this better and better.
Yeah, great points, Matt. And I wonder, Hayley, if you'd like to respond to Matt in terms of particularly around the level of funding that's available to support, knowledge transfer within the centre.
Yeah, and Lucy, jump in if I say something very incorrect here, because this applies across all the portfolios. So as part of the centre's budget, yes, we do have funding to support the initiatives and activities of each of the portfolios, and that funding is equal and fair across them. Of course, it is limited. I think, the first part of how we spend that important money in investing in our centre members and, to be able to translate the research to the best of their ability is hearing from you about where you're at and your needs and your wants. And I might just add, Matt, some of the comments you've just brought up are really important, because tacking on the end of this short little survey we're about to share with you is an opportunity to speak with us and speak with Alana in the portfolio team, and just to unpack some of these things a lot more deeply, to understand where our priorities should be and how we best spend this money. And we do have a budget. It's the centre budget, so the funding that we have at the moment carries us through to about middle of next year, and then we go through the process again, as we do across all of our research in the centre. We'll go through the process for the portfolio in setting our new strategic directions again for the next couple of years. So if we don't get 100% right in our first kind of starting position here, there's more opportunity as we review our strategic plan, and therefore next lot of funding after this first round. Yeah.
Thanks, Hayley. I'm not sure if any of the other panel members would like to comment. I think some of the conversation that maybe leads on for this that we've had on the side is what's the difference between what the Knowledge Transfer Portfolio Committee might be undertaking and the plans of the capacity building portfolio, because there's obviously lots of crossover there. So I wonder maybe if Alyssa, you might like to expand on that for us.
Sure, thank you. I don't want to repeat what was said in the video, but obviously the KT portfolio is really responsible for identifying and promoting different and innovative ways to seek and ensure that the Life Course Centre research is actually disseminated, translated to the broader public and key stakeholder groups. So that can be government, business, not-for-profit, and importantly, the people themselves who are experiencing disadvantage. So really, we're about helping the centre members to engage with consumers and stakeholders at all stages of the research. So really early on to inform and drive research questions, to the other end of the spectrum, which is about, ensuring we effectively translate our findings into policy practice. So we're really about supporting that process, whereas the capacity building portfolio is actively building the capacity of the Life Course Centre to use their research and drive that transformational change we were all talking about in Australia. So this includes developing out the HDR students, the early career researchers, and contributing to the capacity building for the Life Course Centre partners. So this could potentially include enhancing the LCC members' research skills, science communication skills, partner, stakeholder and community engagement skills, and also giving opportunities for that interdisciplinary research experiences, so that might be visiting somewhere, and also developing capacity to obtain funding, improve research designs and deliver and manage projects. So those kind of things. So it's a little bit different, but there's obviously some crossover, I think, especially with the partner and stakeholder and community engagement. And so we're closely working, particularly Hayley, with the capacity building portfolio to just make sure that we're complementing each other in those spaces.
Thanks, Alyssa. Sounds great. Sorry, Sangeetha, you took yourself off mute before and I missed it. Did you have a comment to make, maybe in response to?
Thanks. So I just wanted to respond to the observation about how resource intensive it is to do knowledge transfer. And I think that's absolutely correct. If you're going to really front end the engagement process and work more according to those principles of co-design and co-production. So I'm in the Places program at the University of Melbourne, and we have employed 2 First Nations researchers without whom we could not do the project that we're doing, looking at place, water and well-being. We're also engaging a lot with St Vincent de Paul and the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, and there's a lot of work in relationship building that takes time. And I guess my comment would be that, yes, there are trade-offs there, but I think being able to front end that knowledge, that work in embedding knowledge and building relationships and partnerships pays off down the track, because you have networks that are telling the story of the work that's being done. The work is seen to be relevant and seen to be impactful from the outset and as it develops. And that all translates into impact both along the path and also impact into policy, hopefully down the end of it. So I think it is really important to recognise the resource intensive nature of this and to find ways of providing funding and training, but also to see all the rewards that come from doing this in terms of impact and benefit. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, great comments. Thanks, Sangeetha. And I wondered just, I guess, leading on from the importance of engaging, consumers and community right from the start, as you so importantly point out. Do you know the portfolio committee, their intentions, I guess, or ideas at this point around some training that might point to that and help centre members in terms of how to do that work?
Yes, so in terms of training, I just emphasise again that the survey that Hayley has mentioned is going to be really fundamental to informing our decisions around what training needs what the training needs are of researchers, and there will be differences at different levels. So we're hoping to tailor training to those to what comes out in the survey. We're also going to be undertaking training as part of a broader community engagement program. So there'll be workshops on the how and the why of community engagement in research to build skills, confidence and capacity to be able to implement community involvement in research. This training will also be available to community members who are part of, who are working with researchers. And the kinds of things we'll be looking to do is to identify the barriers to community involvement and how we might address that, and also to develop plans to work, how to develop plans to work in partnership with community members. And we have a fabulous facilitator consultant with extensive experience in the field, Anne McKenzie. So there'll be training, about 6 hours of training available, and we have places for a certain number, I think it's about 30 attendees. So you'll be hearing from us where that training is available for signing up. And this is part of the broader engagement program, I should say, which involves establishing a stakeholder and community reference group, which we see as complementary to the existing processes and also governance that people have within existing projects. But we're looking at developing minimum standards for community engagement within research programs and developing that and embedding it in training. Thanks.
Wow, that all sounds very exciting and something to really look forward to, and a great resource for the centre members. Thanks, Sangeetha. We have some questions that have been popped into the chat, and I wonder, hi Tepi, what ways can the centre incentivise researchers to engage in KT? And I wonder, well, there's been some discussion in that previous comments, but have we answered your kind of questions there, or do you have another comment you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking, there's so many champions on this call for knowledge translation, but of course we all know that within different teams there's different capabilities and different, lesser champions. So how do we bring those people on board who may not be as interested in it as everybody on this call to become champions as well?
Yeah, really important point. And I guess, that does speak to the different experience and the capacity of being part of the portfolio's work to support everyone at whatever level they are across knowledge transfer. And I wonder, perhaps if I could ask Sally just to talk about how the portfolio might support those earlier career researchers that are just starting out on their journey, on their KT journey specifically.
I'm sure. Toby, I don't know if this will answer your question exactly, but in terms of career, one of the things that we're trying to do initially, and some of that's already evidenced in the video you saw, is really draw together some case studies of how this works in practice, because I think that can be incredibly inspiring to people. I think your point that you've raised is one that we've had a lot of discussion about, which is the fact that we have different people that do all sorts of different disciplines and all sorts of different work, and what knowledge transfer means to them and how they feed into that might be different. And this is where not everyone needs to be the person, hopping on the Channel 7 news. That is not knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer is that interactional space. But for some of us, that might be in terms of working with people who have knowledge around the policy space that we're working in. So it might not be that you're getting on the ground and working with families, but you're working with people more in a policy-driven place. I guess the question I would always say is, if at the end of the day your work is intended to do social good, you hopefully will have some interest in knowledge transfer, but it's really for us providing, as part of our team, our committee, providing some of the resources to help those at different stages of kind of their journey of understanding how they can incorporate that within their own work. So not everyone is going to go to an RCT study. That is not the intention here, but really understanding, okay, there are a range of different ways, and hopefully through some case studies, we'll be able to also demonstrate that you can actually be achieving or working towards knowledge transfer that don't necessarily mean these sort of, fact sheet embedding, national RCT study type approaches, but actually much more practical and much more aligned with all the diverse range of research that happens across the centre. So it's a really good point, because it is the challenge that we have, but hopefully through the survey, through continued engagement with people, we can start to bring people on that journey and make sure that we're tailoring for those different levels of understanding and interest in this.
I'd just like to add, because obviously Kevin in the chat has also said that we could be asking about the KT in the projects in the LCC database, and that's actually something that's on the agenda. So obviously you can already log things in the Life Course Central in your projects and what you're putting in, but there will, according to Narelle, who's an Oracle of Wisdom herself, there'll also be a further development of that. So there'll be an organisations and activities section in Central in the next 6 months. So that will be a way of further capturing data points. So for these knowledge transfer activities. So that'll really show everybody that this is something that the LCC is wanting, and it is good practice. It's best practice. So having a space where that can be captured. And also, if you're ever struggling with Life Course Central, please just reach out to your node administrator, because they also are oracles of wisdom. So I think that's something that we're hoping to capture. And if you're having trouble with it, just reach out.
Thanks, Alyssa. And I think that's probably, as you say, something that'll develop over time, and we'll get better and better at the ways that we record those activities that are going on, and capturing all the great examples and case studies through that portal. So I can see Kevin's got quite a lengthy question there, Kevin. I don't know if you want to jump on and ask it, but you're asking about systematic ways or frameworks that are really available to help, support policymakers versus kind of practitioners, and that there seems to be quite a lot around supporting practitioners, but maybe not so much policymakers. If I got your question right there.
I don't know if there's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, are there different, when you're working in this space, is it like there's strategies for policy people? And I imagine with a lot of economists, the Life Course Center focuses around changing policy more directly than our team would, for instance. So.
Yeah, and I wonder, Sangeetha, if you have any comments to make there from your experience.
Yeah, I feel as though there is actually quite a lot of information and evidence and research that's been done on how research on policy impact from research. I feel that maybe there's a role for us to in the committee to actually collate that and provide it as a resource. And there's already some work that my previous institute has done on this that we could add to that. But there is a lot out there. I'd also just note the excellent work that, say, Melbourne Institute has been doing in terms of policy impact in their work on breaking down barriers and in partnerships with other NGOs. So I think there's a lot that we could bring together to shed light on that. And yeah, thanks for the question.
So thanks, Tepi. Really likes the reporting idea to help create the culture through teams of its importance, and also capturing as part of those database, those different frameworks and resources that are out there, who's using what and in what ways. So great idea. Thank you. Also got a comment here from Francis. In my view, the KT portfolio should be less about providing budget for KT for the LCC projects, but more about training and researchers in the KT skills and judgments around how to best to apply these skills in practice. Upskilling will support ongoing careers and spring off grants for the LCC projects. Obviously, writing in budgets will be really vital for the KT work to happen, which is often quite an afterthought or zero budgets in many cases. So yeah, really great comments, and I guess it's the intention around the resources that the portfolio committee will be developing, with your feedback from the survey and all of we've already started gathering many of these frameworks and resources and putting them into some kind of repository, which will be built on and shared over time. So it's all great skills.
I wouldn't mind adding to that. Just I've noticed in a few grants now that stakeholder engagement. So my area is working with people with the lived experience of mental ill health, and a lot of the grants themselves now require consumer involvement and require that from the very outset. And I just agree just with what Francis is saying in that, in terms of making sure there's a budget for it at the very beginning within grants, and this being as part of the Life Course Centre is a brilliant plan.
Definitely, indeed. Thanks, Alyssa. We're actually getting towards the end of our Q&A time, but thanks, Karen Thorpe. I can see some other comments that have popped up in the chat. So what we might do at the end of this is that we will do a bit of a summary and feedback as part of the survey as well, any of the further comments that have been made through the webinar. But I would just like to thank all of the committee members for responding to the questions today. Sorry, actually, I've just noticed one last question, Matt. You've got your hand up there. Sorry, just missing that in my my Zoom screen. So I'll give you a quick chance.
Yeah, look, this was just to give a simple kind of case example, really, of how serious this issue is and how important it is. In the last Life Course Centre, we were funded as part of our work to develop a parenting and family research alliance. One of the activities of that was to undertake a review over a 10-year period of the ARC and NHMRC spend on parenting and family interventions. And out of the 25,000 grants over that time period, 62 related to parenting, accounting for 0.25% of the total spend. There was only about 2 projects on the prevention of child maltreatment. And we've just written and published now a paper involving 27 authors to bring this together as a major knowledge transfer issue, because neither the ARC nor the NHMRC was aware of the degree of neglect of research around parenting, family issues, and particularly child mental health. And but we're in a situation now of, well, who do you communicate this to? It's a really hot issue. We can talk to politicians, we can talk to the NHMRC and ARC, which we've done over the last 2 days. But fundamentally, the knowledge transfer problem is that we need much greater sustained investment in social and behavioural sciences work that is solution focused. And we have a government who's got no bloody idea about what the level of neglect in the R&D investment is in this space. There's no tracking and accountability monitoring of the spend. And so everyone is hampered in this knowledge transfer space with fundamentally being hugely under-resourced relative to other areas of research funding.
Fantastic comments, Matt, and that's just illustrative of that bigger picture in the knowledge transfer space, not at a project level, just the, pulling that collective kind of communication
together. It's a systems change issue that we've got to address as well.
Can I just make a cheeky response to that? I think you're absolutely right, Matt. And depending on what happens on Saturday night, there may be an opportunity to put some, research agendas forwards into a new government who could be much more receptive on these issues. And that's something a Centre of Excellence could do with some impact, I think.
But the LCC has driven this process, has funded the initial initiation of this work, and it would be great to get some advice and support from this portfolio around how to deal with something as crucially important as this.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Matt. We are out of time for the Q&A piece. I'd just like to again to thank the committee members for their questions today and their responses. The portfolio obviously has some exciting things planned and lots to be developed along with your feedback. That's all going to benefit us all enormously in the greater, striving for the greater impact in the work that we do. So I'm going to now hand back to Hayley. So she may have a few more comments to add to that conversation and to outline what's next.
Thanks, Tash, and thanks to the committee members in person and also joining us from other spaces and places at the moment. And thank you all for your contributions and comments and questions. They're really helpful. Keep them coming because we have kept the seminar a bit shorter today to allow you the time, 5 minutes, it's all just 5 minutes, to do our short member survey. The link to it will just miraculously appear in the chat as I'm talking, but you will have received it also hopefully this morning in the Source newsletter that was emailed out. So please take this few minutes before you go to your next meeting on the hour or next thing you need to work on and do the survey for us. It's very short. It's really going to help be very helpful for the committee in understanding the needs and wants in terms of training and support, really so that everyone can have that opportunity to translate their research and have impact to do what we need to do in this centre and break that cycle of deep and persistent disadvantage. So, I see it's in there. Thanks, Narelle. So thank you in advance for completing the survey. Thank you for joining us for the launch of the Knowledge Transfer Portfolio today. The committee really looks forward to working with you over the next few months and years. We're in it for the whole long haul. And feel free to get in touch with any of the committee members, myself, Tash, and I wasn't able to introduce her today, but Alana Papagiorgio is a project officer with the portfolio, so she's very helpful with any of the questions or supports that you may need. So there will be a recording of today's session made available in the next couple of weeks. If you didn't get it all, you want to watch that great video again. But that's it from us. Have a wonderful day and thanks for joining us.